ESBR Boxing. Here we are, myself, my co-colleague, my cohort, my friend Danny. We are here in, I suppose, a reactionary capacity, reactive capacity to the news dropped today by Eddie Hearn that Dillian Whyte Anthony Joshua will not be happening next, will not be taking place on August 12th. We're going to unpick that slightly, talk about potential opponents, react to that news, pair of us in a short sort of 10-15 minute video. Firstly, Danny, I'd like to ask, how are you doing? Are you well?
All's good, mate. All's good. Lovely day in Manchester today, so it's soaking up a bit of sun, bit of vitamin D, but nah, I can't complain. Yourself, all good?
I'm good, man. I'm good. You look like a man who's I suppose replete with vitamin D. And also, to be honest with you, given that's the Manchester skyline, I'm actually stunned to not see it thundering, not see it raining. The sun does indeed shine in Manchester. But so getting onto the topics, what I'm going to ask you first, Danny, is I was going to ask you if I throw two adjectives at you, really, in relation to the news that Dillian Whyte and Joshua won't be fighting, and I just want to get your reaction in light of those. The first one is, how disappointed are you that won't be the next fight between Whyte and Joshua?
Not particularly, to be honest, mate. I don't see it as that competitive a fight. That's just my honest opinion. I know there's a lot made of Joshua's mentality and maybe he's slightly on decline, but I think Dillian Whyte is pretty close to done at this point. And I know the build up might be interesting. Obviously, they go way back. They fought in the amateurs. They had that British title fight, must be about 5 years ago now. But to be honest, I'm not particularly disappointed. I would rather maybe see Joshua in there with someone who's not boxed before, someone who maybe has a bit more left. I'm sure we'll come on to that, but nah, I'm not the arse, mate, to be honest.
No, we said I think Dillian Whyte probably will finish and ought to finish, possibly quite soon. He's looking obviously for a payday. Joshua, I suppose, is obviously looking for an opponent that can kind of tick him over potentially till that fight in December that everyone keeps talking about. The second word I'm going to ask you though is, are you actually surprised that this fight hasn't taken place next, given where they both are? Did it make sense to you at the time?
I am sort of surprised it didn't take place, to be honest. Like in terms of Dillian Whyte, like where else do you go for? I know you're sort of hearing conflicting reports about the money on offer, but even if he was slightly lowballed, like what fight's there for him that's going to pay him anything close to a rematch with AJ? Like Fury's obviously off the table. He got starts by him in 6 rounds last year. Wilder's not going to fight him. You wouldn't have thought so, unless he was being horrifically lowballed, which obviously is a possibility. I can't imagine where it would go. And for Joshua, it makes sense too. It's the sort of fight that, you know, you'd imagine Whyte would just come and sort of bring it for 6 rounds, and Joshua would have sort of no choice but to throw back. And maybe given the fact he's shared the ring twice with Whyte before, there's a bit of personal history, as I say. It could be the sort of fight, the sort of opponent that would sort of light the fire again. And all this chat about Joshua, does he have the dog in him anymore, and all this, it would make sense in that sort of sense, because Whyte will come to fight, or would have came to fight, you'd imagine. So I am actually surprised that it's not happening, though, albeit, as I say, I'll not lose any sleep over it myself.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Actually, I'm really surprised it hasn't taken place. And also, I think perfect fight for Joshua. I think Joshua KO somewhere sort of mid rounds. Still a big-ish name for the casual audience. So yeah, it would have made sense on the business side, I think, and also the matchmaking side for Joshua. Coming on to a name that's potentially been mentioned as an next opponent, Agit Kabayel. For people who don't know, obviously, about Kabayel, he's a guy with 23-0 record. Not necessarily, obviously, had any of those marquee fights as such, and also sits, I think it's 11th in WBO rankings, maybe somewhere around sort of 14 with the IBF, so not a top 10 contender. Can I get your reaction firstly as to Kabayel as a potential opponent? And also, again, do you kind of see it making sense for Joshua, or is it kind of, for you, potentially indicative of where Joshua's at the moment?
Mate, if it wasn't for Kabayel beating Chisora in Monaco and watching that, I would sort of don't think I would believe he exists. He's always linked to the big heavyweights. Fury, he was linked to Fury. Swerve seen him linked to Wilder. He's linked to AJ. He's always a name that comes up, and it never happens. Ever happens. So I would actually like to see Kabayel get it, because he's undefeated. I'm fairly sure. I've not had a look at BoxRec before this. I'm fairly sure he's undefeated. He's got that win over Chisora. Like, it was a better version of Chisora that we saw recently, but how motivated was Chisora for that? It was a fairly drab fight, as I say, in Monaco, if I remember right. So there is an element of interest there. In terms of stylistically, unless Kabayel's dramatically changed his style since that Chisora fight, I remember him being as like sort of on the back foot the whole night. I'm not sure what preparation that would serve for Deontay Wilder, and the only reason I mentioned that as a point of relevance because that's apparently why they didn't want to fight Zhang, because he was a southpaw and they were looking to fight Wilder. So I'm not sure how much sense that would make, but I wouldn't mind Kabayel. I think probably, more chance I would give Kabayel than I would the current version of Dylan White. So, and just to see Ajit Kabayel in a ring would be good for my sanity, I think.
No, assuming the ring as opposed to on milk cartons, going, have you seen this man? I mean, to be fair, I suppose one of the things we can say about Joshua, which I think is actually irrefutable, is the fact that he has actually fought quite a lot of guys that are actually kicking around that top 10. So we look at guys who necessarily hasn't fought before. There's not actually as many as if you look at obviously like Fury's record, even Usyk's record, obviously Wilder, like you touched upon, Zhang as well, but he's obviously fought the likes of Ruiz, White, Joyce, obviously he hasn't, Parker he has, Ortiz is kicking around. Are there any other names, say that it wasn't going to be Kabayel? Is there anyone else you'd like to potentially see him in the ring against next before that potential fight with Deontay Wilder that you alluded to?
Jarrell Miller is the fight I would like to see. I only say that because just before we came on, I think it was the Sun or something reported it that I can't remember the wording, that either he had put himself forward or apparently there were some sort of talks. I would love to see that. Like, obviously, there's so much history there. He's been like calling Joshua every name under the sun in recent interviews. The build-up would be great. Again, another sort of opponent that would maybe light a bit of a fire under Georgia, get him angry, and this sort of return to old Josh has always been said, but like that is the sort of opponent that could potentially bring that. And again, an undefeated fighter, albeit at a level much lower than Anthony Joshua, and that big baby. I know Eddie Hearn said that like he's never going to work with him again and all this year, but like if I'm going to start believing Eddie Hearn pontificating about morals and stuff, the pound note was right, he would do it. Like, so I'd like to see Miller, to be honest. Like, I know we can say what you want about like, oh, you shouldn't be given like a fucking 8 times convicted drug cheat or whatever it is, the platform, but like, come on, look through the sport. There's no point, like, I don't know, trying to legitimize it. So yeah, get Big Baby in there. That's what I want to see.
I saw Sam Jones on Twitter calling for that fight earlier. I also saw I don't know if you saw that, obviously social outlet that Frank Smith saying he'd fight Ben Shalom as well. Maybe we can get that on the undercard if that was going to take place. But just a couple of questions before we round this off then. Obviously you were saying about Deontay Wilder potentially happening in December, which seems to be where everyone's working towards. Do you see Joshua really altering or changing or having this next fight as a potential tune-up, obviously with the training situation? Do you see that working in his favour, or do you frankly think, to be honest with you, no matter what Joshua does now, he's already kind of peaked and it's just a case of potentially maintaining before he gets to that Wilder fight?
Okay, it would definitely help. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sure what would have to happen in Joshua's next fight for me to pick him against Wilder. I'm not saying like there's nothing he could do, but just based on what we saw in that Franklin fight, like it was all wrong for Deontay Wilder. You can't be half in, half out. You know what I mean? He's not going to outbox him for 12 rounds. So it would take a lot more time with Derek James. Not going to be a bad thing. Like the relationship clearly hadn't gelled that much in the 3 months before the Franklin fight. I don't know. A lot, like a fight can change a lot. You know what I mean? As boxing fans, your sort of fighters are only good as their last performance. So say it is a Kabayel or a Miller and he goes in there and looks destructive, maybe the Wilder fight becomes sort of closer to a 50-50 than I think it is in the eyes of most fans now, but it would take a lot, to be honest. And I say that as someone who, like, I don't want to say like I'm a massive Joshua fan, but I do feel for him in a sense, like he's been built up to like completely tore down, and it can't be easy, but it would take a lot for me to pick him against Wilder, like if the fight's going to happen in December, definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the way things are going, I think I'd be backing a Wilder KO. But just a last question for you, Danny. Obviously, we talked a bit about it there as well. But what percentage do you think is there chances that fight actually happening in December? Do you think he will fight Wilder, or do you think we'll see maybe 1 or 2 more fights and that be the end of Anthony Joshua?
I mean, if I was like had just become a boxing fan in the past 6 months, you would think, of course it's happening. You know what I mean? Like, but you just become so cynical of these big fights happening. Like we were told for months and months that Fury Usyk was done and everything was agreed, and obviously completely fell apart. And the rumblings from both sides are good. The only sort of slight thing I say, I watched an interview with Eddie Hearn not that long ago when he was mentioning like the purses obviously won't be an issue out in Saudi Arabia, but as long as Joshua's broadcasting deal with the zone is respected, so hopefully that wouldn't come in there. But like pure cynicism aside, you would have to say it looks like it's fairly likely to happen. I don't want to like, obviously it can all collapse very quickly, but yeah, I'm going to be the optimist here. Fury Usyk, I wasn't convinced the whole time that would happen. This, I've gone to my head. I'm saying it happens.
Excellent, Danny. Well, we'll leave it there. I just want to say, guys, obviously, thank you for joining me, Danny. But also, I suppose in summary, what we can say is that not too well surprised, but not disappointed that the white fight's not happening. Caballero we'd accept, I think, or if it's going to lead obviously to the Wilder fight, and there's no dramas with Joshua there, and he comes through it. If not for drama and for excitement and for theatre, we'd love to see Miller. Hopefully the deal, with Wilder and Joshua won't collapse. If it doesn't, Joshua probably will collapse. I think we're saying that, aren't we? They'll be collapsing under a fucking large right hand at some point in that fight. But yeah, check out obviously the outlet, for other stuff on this sort of breaking story, and obviously around the time as well when obviously it's a developing story, and we'll bring you more news as and when it happens. Danny, I just want to say thank you very much to you for joining me, and hope the weather in Manchester continues to hold for you. And guys, as always, thanks again for watching.
Thanks very much, folks.